it needed to also have a way of working on those issues that lead to war, economic issues, human rights issues, political issues. And it was in the process of doing that that the UN established a whole number of programs, agencies, and other forms through which they could address the issues that cause war to happen. So some of you may have heard of UNICEF. Okay, UNICEF is a program of the UN directly funded by the General Assembly that deals with the welfare of children, established right after the Second World War. There's United Nations Environment Program that deals with environmental issues. There's the UN Development Program that deals with providing funds for the development in the more undeveloped countries in the world. There are a whole number of agencies in the UN system that deal with everyday things that affect the lives of every one of us. For example, if you mail a letter somewhere, to go somewhere, anywhere in the world, one of the reasons it gets there is because the International Postal Union, an agency of the UN, organizes postal delivery. If you take a trip on a plane, you don't have to worry about the safety of the plane landing and taking off, because there is a standardized method that's adhered to by all countries that fly international aircraft, and that's organized by the International Agency on Air Travel based in Montreal. It's a UN agency. The UN has an agency that provides weather reports so that whether it's a tsunami or it's a weather that's going to affect agriculture, whatever, there's a UN agency called the World Meteorological Organization based in Geneva that provides that information. There are hundreds and hundreds of satellites traversing the globe, and those satellites provide your ability to get on your cell phone and talk to somebody anywhere in the world. And that's organized by a UN agency that's based in Geneva, International Telecommunications Union. If you take a trip on a ship, the World Maritime Agency based in London is involved in providing the rules and regulations to do that. So that's just how the UN, in some ways, the UN family helps in providing a better way of life, providing, in a sense, the basis for a culture of peace, because the basis of a culture of peace is the interconnection between all of us on a personal level, whether it's violence in the family, but also on a global, nation-wide, and international level. So one of the other things that the UN developed was a human rights system, a system through which we could define what human rights are. And in 1948, under the leadership of the wife of the President of the United States, Mrs. Eleanor Roosevelt, she was assigned the job of being the chairperson for the Commission on Human Rights, out of which grew a document called the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And because of that declaration, a number of covenants were negotiated and signed, placing the 30 articles of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights into a legal framework, so that there are covenants and treaties that have been adopted as a result of that declaration. Now, I don't know how many people here ever even heard of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Anybody ever hear of it? We have a few hands. It's not taught in the school system. It's absolutely amazing that this document, Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which actually codifies all of the individual human rights that every single person is born with, and yet that document is not made into public knowledge. So it's one of the things that my organization, many organizations, and SGI has played a role in trying to educate people about what the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is. But one of the things that the UN is accused of, they say, well, the UN doesn't do much. All they do is talk. Well, this is a very important concept, because it's true that one of the things the UN does, especially in the General Assembly and in other places, is they talk. When there is no forum for talking, for dialogue, then what begins to happen is you move away from a culture of peace to a culture of war, because there isn't a way to solve the problems that people need to have a dialogue about. So it's no accident that at the conclusion of the annual report of President Ikeda, in this annual report this year, he calls upon the creation of a culture of dialogue. It's very interesting that he comes to the conclusion that he calls it dialogic. And it's very interesting, it's dialogic, because the previous period of time was also had a different sort of initial, but it starts with the word diablo, which is the sort of the definition, or the dictionary definition of the devil. So you can go from from diablo, diabolic, to dialogic. That's the essence of what President Ikeda was saying, is to move away from no dialogue to a world community in which dialogue is fundamental to the solving of problems. One of the things that the General Assembly does, the General Assembly is this very unique body where every single nation on earth, big or small, has a vote. And through the General Assembly, there are a number of things that happen, and various committees that are formed out of that 192 representatives. And one of the things that happens is they pass things called conventions, treaties, declarations, and so forth. So the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was passed in the General Assembly. But they also passed conventions. Convention on the rights of children, conventions on the abolition of racism, convention on the abolition of sexism, convention on the rights of refugees. They have passed over 120 conventions and treaties that came out of the dialogue at the General Assembly. And then it goes back to the General Assembly, they vote on that, and it becomes something by every nation to be considered for their countries to adopt. Now, what happens is if the General Assembly passes a convention or a treaty, it automatically goes to every one of the 192 member states. And if that member state then passes that convention, it's called ratification. If they ratify that convention, like the Convention on the Rights of Refugees or the Convention on the Rights of Children, if they pass that document, that then becomes the law of that country. So the UN is involved in creating international law. More international law has been created by the UN in its existence than has been created or developed in all of the history of human civilization. And it all happened through the dialogue at the General Assembly. So you see, there's a big connection between the devil and the diablo, the diabolic, and the dialogic.